Good morning. My name is John Marceno, and today you're here with Inheritance Advanced. And we are fortunate enough to have Stephen Scriber, who's an attorney who handles many, many probate cases. Stephen, welcome.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
So I thought that it would be really helpful. A lot of times our clients or customers call in, either potential, they're not there yet, or they're thinking about doing an advance with us. Mm-hmm. But they still have a lot of questions surrounding the probate actual process and how things go. And, actually my funding executives put together a list of questions that I thought you could really help these customers know more about the probate process and really come to better decisions when they're trying to decide what they would like to do.
Okay.
So one of the questions that always comes up is, will the administrator or the executor told them that if they were looking to take an advance, that actually would elongate the process, or it could make the process go longer if they did in fact take an advance, which would hurt everybody else in the estate. Maybe you can give some clarity on that.
Yeah. So, as a general rule, taking an inheritance advance doesn't really extend probate. Particularly in Georgia, where we practice the process of getting an administrator or executor put into place and then the estate distributed. That process kind of operates independently of any other outside factors. So if someone gets an inheritance advance, essentially that advance would get paid back at the same time that they would get distributions from the estate. So let's say you were going to get $100, but you got an advance, you advanced 10 of it. When the estate does a distribution, they'll typically just pay back that inheritance pay back that $10, and then you would still get back the other 90. But as an administrative issue, it shouldn't add any extra time. It's just potentially like an extra step for an administrator. But it's a step that can be usually done in like a few minutes to resolve.
Yeah. Okay. So that's good to know. Another one is they're always worried that if they take an advance, like let's say they, that same example you just gave, they take $10. Does that $10 that they take as an heir, does that take away from any other heir in the estate, or is it just their share?
Yeah, it typically only takes away from that share if only that heir takes an advance. If all the heirs collectively make an agreement to get an advance together then it would be shared. Or if it was or if the executor or the administrator needed that advance to actually pay estate bills, like for example, to make sure a mortgage doesn't go into foreclosure, or to actually preserve something in the estate that will then yield way more gain to the estate and the heirs, then it might be paid back by the estate, but then all the heirs would get a significantly better benefit.
Right, got it. But if I were just an heir, not an administrator, and I was getting $100 and I took 10 of it as an advance up front, that wouldn't affect anybody else's share at all, correct?
Oh no, it would just affect the person who took that advance.
Great. Okay. Yeah, because they're always worried that, if I take this, it's going to affect my brother or my sister or somebody else. So it's good to know that, obviously it wouldn't.
Exactly. You aren't subject to an agreement that someone else signed on that.
So you'd mentioned the executor or administrator. What are some of the things that an executor or an administrator could do to actually help the probate process go faster?
Oh man, there's so much. I don't know where to start. So the first step is that they should actively, hopefully, engage an attorney, because they will then be aware of all the steps they need to take and to be able to do them quickly. But the main goal of an administrator and executor is to figure out if there's any estate debts, gather any estate assets, pay those debts, and then distribute the balance to the heirs. So as long as they're doing those things in a relatively quick way, then there wouldn't be estate delay. So I can say an average estate would probably take 6 months to a year to resolve that process with.
Right.
And sometimes it can be done a lot faster, but if it's taking way longer than that, it's usually the administrator or the executor either not knowing what to do or just being, I'll say, not diligent or not aggressive in managing the estate.
Yeah. Yeah, we also notice like a lot of those things happen that sometimes they don't even know where to start.
Exactly.
And so having an attorney, as you mentioned, I think is a really good thing to help them guide them through the process, even if they want to do most of it on their own.
Yep.
Having that sort of guardrail as an attorney, help you through the process. I've seen it always works better.
Exactly. It's like I don't fix my own plumbing. If I was leaking my pipe, and I'm just I'll ask a plumber to fix it, or ask them to make sure I didn't mess it up.
Right.
And that's kind of what we help our clients at as well. It's like make sure they didn't mess up their job as an administrator.
Okay. Yeah. No, I totally agree. So when you kind of take a look at it, we've actually been able to help a lot of clients nationwide get advances. I know one or two clients have actually been your clients.
Mm-hmm.
And can you maybe describe or talk about how, this advance or our company has helped the clients and your law firm, kind of get the probate process continue to go or going?
Exactly. So I guess it helps on two levels. So one, for a lot of the clients we work with you all, and I think now we're up to like 4 or 5.
Yeah.
A lot of times the heirs just didn't have the resources to hire an attorney. So almost every time they've used it to retain counsel and to do things like pay court costs and to actually get the ball rolling. So it was a difference in advance to pay your attorney, but because of that, you don't let the estate sit there for 6 months, a year. Or in some cases, I've had estates sit there for several years because no one hired an attorney. But what it does is allow the estate to get processed faster. All the heirs can do the process correctly, and they can then get their inheritance a lot faster. So even with that advance, it enables them to get their job done as administrator executor faster.
That's great.
But also for me as an attorney, it helps me. As a law firm, I'm not a bank in that sense, so I can't necessarily advance the cost for my clients.
Right.
So a lot of the times when a client can't pay those fees, they're left kind of scrambling, or it kind of limits the amount of advice I can give them because they're operating in a limited budget.
Yeah.
But being able to get those funds from the estate earlier, it allows them to fully engage my firm and to have everything done correctly, quickly, and we get all that stuff filed. And honestly, stuff we've done, it's shaved off a significant amount of time because we're just able to prepare the paperwork, get everything signed. We already have the court costs. And so in those kind of cases, instead of waiting 4 or 5 months to get something done, we get it done in under a month or 2. So
yeah, that's great. One of the things I think back on one of the cases that we worked on with your firm, which we were really proud of, is we actually helped someone stave off foreclosure.
Exactly.
And maybe you can talk a little bit about that process. That there was an outside administrator, and kind of helping out with the case, and maybe you can kind of talk a little bit about how that went.
And so this is another example of someone not being able to hire an attorney early on, and this is not an unusual situation where someone died years ago. Like in this case, it was like 2-3 years ago. The mortgage had not been paid at all during that time.
Yeah.
And by the time they came to me and us, the foreclosure notice had already been sent. The bank was in the process of that. Yeah. So we were able to use the advance to prevent the foreclosure, which has 2 levels of benefit. One, obviously, we don't lose the house, but also selling a house in foreclosure, you will get a lot lower price than if they had the extra breathing room to sell the house through a fair market sale.
Right.
So they're able to sell the house for a much higher value, pay back the advance, and then also have a significant amount of money more for the heirs in that case.
Yeah. Yeah, we were excited to help the client, and that's a lot of what we try and do is to really obviously help the client, help the attorney, get the probate process. I almost look at it as oil for the engine.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Sometimes you just need the advance in order to get things done.
Exactly.
We've been in cases where I've seen us be able to help the executor fix up the house in order to get it on the market and sell it. Unfortunately, I've seen things even where it's heart-wrenching, where they literally need an advance to bury their loved one.
Oh man.
And
Yeah.
so, the funds just aren't liquid because they're tied up in a house, and they just have to wait to sell the house. But unfortunately, the bills for the funeral home still need to be paid up front.
Exactly.
So there's been so many things that I'm really proud of. And, it's sort of on all scales. Like we've seen it where we've helped people that are in that sort of situation all the way to, we have an investor who is looking to buy a building for, 7 figures and was going through some complicated tax issues and different things, but had an enormous inheritance and trust coming.
Mm-hmm.
And we were able to, advance him the funds in 48 hours after confirming through underwriting all of his shares as an heir. And he was able to buy that building. And, so whether it's, they're getting an advance of, $10,000 or $500,000, we've been, able to kind of help a lot of customers nationwide.
That's awesome. And that's one of those few like win-win-wins where hopefully everyone comes away with a better outcome.
Absolutely. Maybe you can also, tell us, like, if all of a sudden, God forbid, you find yourself, you lost a loved one, you now are in charge of, the estate and getting everything prepared and done. What's your first move? What do you do?
My first move is to hire an attorney. I'm going to talk with counsel. And not necessarily the first, but necessarily go straight from the funeral to the law office. But a lot of times delaying the legal process makes it a lot worse.
Yeah.
It's like in a situation where people wait years and are talking about a house going to foreclosure because a mortgage didn't get paid or property taxes didn't get paid. And even more exaggerated examples, like literally I have like cases where a parent will die with some children and then years pass without them doing anything and the house is still in that parent's name and then the children start to die and now you have grandchildren and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So to kind of hedge all that and to prevent all that kind of longer term things, you would want to hire an attorney as soon as you could just to make sure everything gets done correctly and early. I'll kind of go back, like, as my dad always told me, like, no problem ever got better with time.
Yeah.
And these kind of things, not dealing with the estate, it never gets easier.
Yeah. We see that on our side all the time. Yeah. Things definitely get exacerbated by time.
Yeah.
And you're right, problems don't, it's sometimes, they'll work themselves out, but they really don't.
No.
They actually do snowball and get much larger.
And usually more people get involved, and sometimes the people stop liking each other.
Yeah, and it's interesting. You had mentioned that sometimes, like, then if things are put off, then the current heirs, they start to pass away, and then there's a whole waterfall of rights that go with each generation.
Yeah.
And so getting ahead of it and making sure really does help everybody.
Exactly.
And getting that attorney involved right away really does help everybody walk away with the most amount of money and the least amount of cost.
Yes.
And so that we see that every day on our side. The biggest thing that I could say, I'm not a lawyer, but I see this every day from our side. The thing that seems to elongate the process is the infighting, and with different heirs inside the estate. And a lot of it is due to what you're saying, is that the process took so long that all of a sudden problems that could have been nipped in the bud, all of a sudden, they wind up growing to this huge mountain that they didn't need to be.
Exactly. Like years ago by, people will stop. People will lose confidence in each other to do the right thing or sign things. And a lot of times a lot of stuff can be prevented by acting reasonably quickly to get the legal part done.
Here's some other ones. Do probate laws, I know you are, you're based out of Atlanta, and you're obviously from Georgia. You clearly know the Georgia laws back and forth, but are there different laws, like probate laws, in different states?
Yes, so they vary, but with similar overall themes.
Okay.
So, like if someone dies with a will, usually the will prevails as far as distributing an estate. And a lot of times someone dies without a will, there's usually some allocation to the nearest family members, like almost always a spouse and a child or children.
Yeah.
And then if neither of them exist, then they'll be looking to parents and siblings and stuff like that.
Yeah.
almost every state also, regardless of what the will says, allows a surviving spouse to receive a share of the estate.
Yeah.
Georgia does not. Georgia is an exceptional state where the spouse doesn't necessarily get an inherent share of the estate, but they can ask for a year of support instead, which
different.
is one of those very unique things that Georgia does. But for the most part, though, most states have pretty pretty clear people who would benefit from the state.
Yeah.
And a lot of people who wouldn't benefit, like long-term unmarried partners, don't generally benefit unless there's a will, or close friends, family members, caretakers, unless they're written in, that wouldn't inherit from the state.
Yeah, it seems like you're right. Like the themes always sound the same. Where like you have to file a petition.
Oh, in that
right?
process, yeah.
Right? You have to give notice to the world that the heir has passed away. You have to do claims period.
Yes.
Right.
Oh yeah, and the minutia process. Yeah, you have to file. You have to run publication. You have to gather the creditor claims, pay the creditor claims.
Right.
And then at any point, people can object along it. So if the heirs don't like how the estate's being run, they can run to the court. If the creditors don't feel like they've been paid, they can go to the court.
Yeah.
And those are all the kind of things that and depending on the nature of the estate as well, the court may need to grant permission to sell property.
Yeah. Yeah. The other thing that I see that really where the attorney comes in is exactly that, right? Making sure that the judge approves if they, didn't get full administration, making sure that the court approves the estate sale of property or
exactly,
things in the estate that have to be done. The other thing I really, it's great when the attorney is involved because it helps the whole process flow faster, is just getting everybody in line, right? Keeping everybody on that same track, like making sure they do all the minutia, because that's where everybody gets lost.
Yes, exactly. In a perfect world, I'll do all the paperwork and they just have to come in and sign it.
Right.
Because I don't have to fix someone's work that they tried to do it on their own and then something went wrong.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's very helpful. I appreciate that. If you kind of took a look at it, what would be you had mentioned some timeframes, but what is the typical timeframe? And I'll just use Georgia because that's, the state that you're out of. What's the typical timeframe on a, probate case from start to finish?
So I'll say for the run-of-the-mill estate where someone is leaving something that has an estate comprised of adults as beneficiaries, if there's a will, getting the will admitted into probate is usually pretty quick if all the heirs, in that case might be the spouse and the children, agree to it. Then there's a 3-month period for creditor claims to be posted, and then usually around month 6, the estate will start to distribute. And usually around the year or so mark, or 1 to 2 year mark, depending on what distributions need to be made, the estate will then kind of be wound down.
Yeah.
And if there's not a will, that process is probably going to be it's going to be a bit longer. So there's going to be an additional process to be named as the administrator, and then an additional 4-week process to be given the right to sell property, and then the sale and the wind down. So without a will, we're probably looking at probably closer to the 2-year mark, and with the will, probably closer to like the 1-year mark from wire to wire. But beneficiaries might start getting things maybe around the 6-month mark.
Got it.
And hopefully earlier if there's no credit, if the person died without debt.
Right. What about COVID? How has COVID impacted the court system and the probate process?
Oh man, it's speaking for myself in Atlanta, our courts. I think it is true for all my friends who are doing probate as well. Is that our courts literally shut down for extended period of time, so we couldn't file cases as quickly. So we couldn't meet with clerks to process things. So we were doing a lot of things by mail. There was only one court that we were filing things, and they told us to walk it. They told us what we needed to do, but then they sent me down the street to the post office to mail it back to them because they weren't allowed to take the paperwork out of my hand last March. So all these things are kind of gunking up the process.
Yeah.
So it's probably in some cases double, triple the amount of time that things that would take 6 weeks started taking like 3-4 months.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times because they were short staffed. Some of the staff had to work at home. This was like generally true. We couldn't get hearings in front of the judge.
Yeah.
So those things all were just crawled to a halt.
Yeah.
The upside in some cases was that it did make real estate did go up in value during that time.
Yeah.
So the estate's books a lot of times still did better. So assets that were worth $1 in 2020 now are worth $1.50 in 2021 when they finally were able to get rolling on it.
Yeah.
So
it's kind of a catch.
That's actually do it. So if you're patient and you can keep the estate afloat for that period of time, then you could potentially come out ahead. And if you didn't have the resources or things were more time sensitive, then it was a real hindrance for the courts to be slowed down.
Got it. Well, yeah, I mean, we're still seeing some of those effects for sure on our end. But, I guess that's, to not plug my own commercial, but I guess that's part of the reason why it's great to be able to have liquidity and
Exactly.
get in advance. Like you said, if you're patient, if you can be patient, great. And if you can't, maybe through our advance you can and then benefit.
Exactly. We're not doing stuff like, because I've had advances do stuff like literally like pay the mortgage.
Yeah.
Which it turns out banks, because even with the court slowed down, it turns out banks still like to get paid their bills.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Funny how that works.
Yeah, funny. Yeah. So stuff like that. So the advances often help us kind of keep things going for, I guess, the 2020, 2021
Right.
until the judges were finally able to come back in and sign things.
Yeah, good deal. Well, that's all I have, but maybe you can tell people just a little bit about you and your law firm.
Oh yeah. So I have a law firm. So I'm in Atlanta, Georgia, but I've been doing this for about 10 years, helping people do probate and estate work generally.
Uh-huh.
So, but we kind of work with all types of families to kind of get things through the process. So in an ideal situation, we get people early during the process to get everything squared away, to do all the stuff that hopefully doesn't require therapy to get it done, but also to help encourage people to treat the probate process less like a emotional process and more just the business process of getting the I's dotted and T's crossed with the legal stuff. So that kind of turn a lot of stuff down. Like the court's not trying to hurt your feelings. It's just people doing their jobs. And same for a lot of the law stuff. It's just kind of helping people like it is how it is, and we'll help you kind of get through it.
Yeah, I think it's important. I think that's a really important point because I think there's sort of two things that are going on simultaneously when you find yourself in probate. One, you find like the clients that we talk to, they find themselves very, sort of still in an emotional state. They've lost somebody.
Exactly.
And so they're kind of reeling and dealing with that. And then all of a sudden they're thrusted into a process they don't really understand, and they don't really know that it's going to take that long. And unfortunately, we're all used to seeing like on TV, right? Where, somebody passes away, everybody gathers with the lawyer, he reads the will or she reads the will. And then within a half hour, everybody gets their money.
Yep.
And it's the next episode.
Yep.
But the truth of the matter is, as you sort of explained, and that was even before COVID, the typical time frame can be 12 to 18 months. And with COVID, we're seeing 2 to 3 years.
Yes.
And so, for those of you who absolutely need help, Stephen, if you're in the Atlanta or the Georgia area, please look him up. Fantastic attorney. We've had a couple of clients that literally came to us, and we were able to refer to him, and that all started actually with a client that he already had that we helped. And we recognized that he did such a good job with them through the process that when we had clients that were beginning the process and need an attorney, we handed out a couple of attorneys and said, please, try and get a hold of Stephen, and they did. And so it's been, a great working relationship, but that's always based on seeing how you handle the clients, and we really, really appreciate it.
Oh no, it's great. Everyone we worked with has been fantastic. So
yeah. So thank you so much. I appreciate your time, Stephen.
Thank you
for coming in today.